So this is leadership in practice. Once again, in practice, vastly different than in theory. In theory, things are a lot simpler, a lot cleaner. It's usually very one-dimensional advice. In practice, probably the single best way to think about it is think of two polarizing opposite pieces of advice, and both being correct. There's the challenge of leadership in practice, making decisions. And usually most of the tension will come between a long-term versus short-term. A lot of things in the short run, very obvious and easy to do.
Yeah.
But when you factor in what happens that we actually happen to be alive and wake up tomorrow morning, then comes the long-term, and there it gets more challenging. Because a lot of times the best pieces of advice actually is difficult, painful, and even you lose in the short term. But winning in the long term.
Whenever you say that, I think about parenting. I think I've shared this before. My mother used to always say, you might hate me now, Erin and Megan, to myself and my sister, but you're gonna love me later.
And I have heard this phrase maybe like at least 200 times from Megan. And I've learned just recently that phrase was actually not her mother, but it's Megan speaking at me. Right? I hate you now.
This is very true.
I may one day, right? So
Yes, some of it I'm like, okay, I have to remember it later. I'm gonna love you later.
Yes, no, I have
Right now.
a decoder of Megan's words back at me. They're usually very like aggressive in the passive way, but all right.
So known as passive aggressive.
Top reasons why mentor relationships fail. Now, this I thought would be a fascinating topic because there's been a lot of studies now talking about employee surveys at the workplace. And one of the top themes, I think it's like coming out to almost like 70% of the number one theme coming from employees is that I'm not getting mentored, right? Nobody is helping me learn, grow. And the cost of that is that I feel like I need to go somewhere else to learn. And people are, like jumping on online learning in different aspects, but there are very few things that you can learn, especially when it comes to leadership, when it comes to decision-making, from watching a video, reading a book, reading a blog, or some self-help tutorial. You have to learn from human beings who have the reps and experience in the arena. Josh Wakeskin, who's a famous chess player, I remember he spent 6 months with him, just kind of spending a lot of time with us. But one of the things we always talked about was this notion of an armchair professor, right? A lot of advice we get is almost like picture an armchair professor telling you, smoking a giant pipe, it's about happiness. It's about doing the right thing. And just kind of these pieces of advice, you're like, okay, I agree with all that. But like, what do I do in this crazy situation? And the difference of someone who knows it in their bones, learned in the trenches. And there's a level of nuance and detail, and just the understanding of how many judgment calls and decisions every situation takes. So I just kind of searched online, and this is kind of like, I didn't make these images, mentoring as a little globe, and when to end mentorship relationships: when the mentee has outgrown the mentor is no longer helpful, the relationship has become a burden, the mentor has become a hindrance, the mentee is no longer learning. There's a gazillion reasons of kind of what's out there, but we'll kind of dive into stuff, and those 5 things are whatever. Like, there's a gazillion reasons, but we all have relationships that have expired, or we have relationships that we don't have and don't work, and we typically don't have the experience to make the right calls, to keep the right people around us. There is a general notion that I've always found to be fairly accurate, that we are the sum total of the 5 people we keep closest to us. So I like the 5, and I picture the 5 being 5 chairs around my head, and I get to choose who sits in those chairs. But the challenge is I have to often kick people out then, right, to make room for someone who's better, and I have to constantly look for someone better because I want the best. But then there is a ruthless nature to saying, well, I'm going to be a mercenary and thank you temporarily. And there's a cost to that too. So there are these kind of impossible choices, but learning to navigate that is what leadership is about. I thought I'll start with this. I saw this online, kind of made me laugh, sent it to Megan. She laughed. So I was like, all right, maybe we all need this. I just turned off the news and put on a serial killer documentary to relax. I feel just reading the news, I mean, Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
there's so much stuff is happening so rapidly that if you want to get your heart rate up
Yeah.
and get a good, like, heart palpitating workout, just read the news, right? And then open again like 5 minutes later and you'll get another one. Like, so hopefully some of you are watching some good killer documentaries to calm down.
So
Some of them
true.
are kind of entertaining. But,
Yeah.
right, so here's kind of what was fun. Last week we had a leadership academy and I was looking for just different slides to use, and we have like a repository of like, I don't know how many presentations over the years. And one of the groups that we adopted for like 2 years in our offices in New York was a group called Founders Institute. There's a lot of startup institutes and, a lot of them, to be honest, they're kind of really crappy. And I think I should rip off most founders for different ways besides the money they charge, the time they take from entrepreneurs. And I always think the value of their time is so high, everyone forgets about this. So Founders Institute was founded by this guy named Adeo, and Gabe Zuckerman, who I got to know very well over the years, same as Megan, helped him create it. And Gabe ran the New York arm for a while. So Megan and I started like mentoring there and quickly became the top mentors, I think, in the East Coast or the country or whatnot. But anyways, so we adopted Founders Institute. They would meet for, I think it was like 13 or 16-week curriculum. It was actually one of the more well-run groups, very structured. And a group is good when you see how much they've scaled. So they have like 150 chapters around the world. Obviously, certain cities have some of the bigger chapters like New York City, San Francisco. And they get a cohort of entrepreneurs that have to apply, they have to pay. And then once you go in, it's like a school curriculum that just runs every single week. And they meet once a week on Wednesdays. And so we adopted this group and literally hosted it out of our offices for over 2 years. And so, we provide the space, the food and all this stuff, and they all loved hanging out and everything. And then one of the things that I found very early on was there's an amazing amount of value in teaching. Teaching actually challenges your understanding of stuff. But I remember there was a discussion, I think I can't remember who it was, I had this with, might be Josh Waiskin, saying, but there are 2 types of teaching. There is the notion of like whale blubber, which is like stored fat. Stored fat teaching makes you number and dumber the more you teach. The best form of teaching is you're struggling with the material yourself. It's cutting edge. And the act of trying to teach it and the supposed annoying questions of clarification, everything you get, helps you see the gaps in your understanding and learning. And that type of teaching is very rare. It's what the Glenn Gaffney from the CIA, who spent a lot of time and built a cybersecurity unit, always called learning in public.
Yeah, learning in public.
Right? The highest form of learning are those who can do that. So Megan and I started, teaching different classes, and they have 16 different topics you can pick. And so we have a folder literally of covering every topic. But then in exchange for adopting them, I wanted them to include our leaders to be teachers. So a lot of our senior leaders had to go and teach like a lecture in the Founders Institute. So one of the topics that we always got asked to teach was this topic of team and advisors. And this literally is exactly the cover page. You can follow me
This is
on
from
Twitter.
10 years ago.
But yeah, Founders Institute, June 10, 2015, which is 10 years ago. So instead of 21 years of mistakes and lessons learned, we're at 31. So took the presentation, and to be honest, most of it, it's kind of crazy. It was fairly intact, added a few little additions. I'm just going to take you through some of what's there. I thought it was kind of neat. So
And yes, that's Next Jump pre-pandemic in 2015. And that's Charlie with no gray hair and me with dark brown hair before I was blonde.
And
Like,
just
we
so
look
you know,
like different
but
human beings.
Megan,
And
just-
Laura has red hair in there. I don't know if
Oh.
you saw yourself, Laura. Complete red hair
Yeah,
in
for
there.
those of
Doesn't
you that
matter.
know, women color their hair so they can go blue hair, red
We get
hair.
to do
it's
whatever
all
we
fake,
want.
but,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to tell what their real color is, but yeah, that's, yeah, you can see Wei there who looks like a little boy. That's a bunch of so next show we would have our Christmas party. And we say
At a
Christmas
club.
because I grew up saying Merry Christmas, but we would have it in February or March. Just because, why not?
And
Someone
that's where
made
the
up a
dance
date.
battle was born.
Yeah, dance battle, we would rent out clubs, and it's like the one day every next jumper would get dressed up, so suddenly you realize, wow, we have good-looking employees. But on a daily basis, they all look like dirtbags, wearing nothing but
I don't
sweatpants,
know.
same
The
t-shirts.
engineers.
It's true,
The
but
business
no, but
side.
like, it's amazing, when you get dressed up, everyone just looks gorgeous. So, and especially if you do it once a year. But no, it would be a crazy, we bring a London, Boston, San Francisco offices all into New York for twice a year. But the one that we did our Christmas party was in March.
I digress.
Much cheaper. You have bigger parties. But so anyways, this is the company that started this thing. And I've shared this slide many times coaching entrepreneurs that what is winning and how many people who go into building a company want to make a lot of money. And if you actually go to Atlantic City, Vegas, or any casino, the odds of winning on a roulette, picking a single number, is actually higher than trying to start a company to make money. So if that is your objective, is to have, money making, and that is in your top two objectives of starting a company, you're really bad at math, because the mathematics odds would say 1 in 38, as in pick a single number. And a lot of times when people quit, right, to go and start a company, you're mortgaging your potential income, your job, right? So I'm just picking $100,000 as a bet. You have a better shot of just taking a wad of 100,000, just putting in a single number, right, on the roulette wheel than starting a business. And the odds of successfully starting a business and finding liquidity is so rare. So the odds of an IPO selling or liquidity, I think these numbers have gone worse because the startup world has now become so intense that everyone's starting a company. Just easier with Shopify. There's so many things now you can do. And even with, I think there's 12 million people who say their primary income is social media influencer. That's in the US. And that's an insane number. Talk about a market about to crash, right? That's their main source of income, making little silly videos online and hoping someone follows and get ad revenue. 1 in 2,000, and this was 10 years ago. I would argue it's probably closer to 1 in 100,000 now of your chance of making it. And yet when they go into who makes money, a lot of times they raise money, the number gets even smaller. I can't remember if it was like 10% or less. Most people make no money. You see all these exits people do. I sold my company. All the money went to investors. Any financing round that has what they call these liquidation rights, and they will have sometimes what they call 3x liquidation rights, which means that if you raise $100 million, but it was on 3x liquidation rights, that group has a right to pull out 300 million first before any dime is divided into you. So a lot of times these companies will raise billions, right? They raised $1 billion and they sold for 2 billion. The founders and every employee gets zero. The investors are the ones. So this financial engineering and stuff. So anyways, very, very difficult to make money. Better play roulette. So realize kind of the cold hard truth of the odds of making money is easier gambling on a roulette wheel. This was a slide from, I think it was a TED Talk. I can't remember the guy's name now, but it was studying 200 companies and the top 5 factors in seeing success. Fundraising, which is what everyone talks about, was at the very bottom. The business model was next, and everyone obsesses about getting the right business model. And I loved even Gabe Zuckerman. He'd always say, everyone's like, I can't tell you my idea, right? I need an NDA. I need to keep it secret. And he would go back at them saying, are you telling me the stranger that I met in the subway in New York City, I am going to mortgage my entire life and ditch everything to pursue your idea? He's like, every single person in the subway sitting on some idea they think is going to be great. And the reality is everyone's full of idiotic ideas, and some may be good ones, but none of it even matters in the idea. It's going to have to iterate and change so fast. So the business model quickly goes to the idea, right? And most ideas are just not that good. They all evolve. It's like no different than, to be honest, most children kind of suck, but they have to grow up to become great. And that takes a lot of contact sports, right? And any child who, any parent who thinks their child is a genius at such young ages, I'm like, Jesus, they're clearly biased that, once again, play roulette instead. Team execution. And then this is the interesting thing. The number one thing when they study every portfolio company, they always come back to is timing. They talk about like an Airbnb, how the idea that someone would spend time in your house, right? Unheard of, except because of the financial crash, right? The mortgage crisis, suddenly all this excess, housing is there and people are starving for cash. And so the idea of how about I just let someone, and remember, initially it started renting a mattress. It was like a,
that's crazy.
like an actual
like a
air
futon
mattress,
or something
right?
in your
So
living room, right?
you're sleeping in my house on a futon, and I'm kind of making you I mean, this sounds insane. That's how they started their crazy business model,
Yeah.
right?
Talk
They
about
required,
iteration to
no,
your
they
point,
had, they
right?
required everyone to buy these air mattresses. And so it's just insane that it would have never worked, and it wasn't working until
The
that
timing
financial
worked,
crash
right,
happened.
right.
There's a lot of businesses that kind of work that way. And so everyone says timing. Now, if you ever go to a casino, right? And you watch people who are, the fanatical ones who look like they're clearly high on 6 energy drinks and probably high on something else, haven't eaten for days, that bloodshot look, they talk about timing, right? God, I just need to time it. I need to time making the bet now. No, hold back now. And you'll see anybody who puts timing in the top of the list of success factors. I typically say run for the hills, because they're bloodshot gambling addicts. Timing is not in your control. Now, which is why my thesis was team, and building that strong team and the ability for that team to execute on any idea, any business model, and constantly grow themselves so they can even grow business models and ideas they can pursue. That is the number one thing in your control. So invest in that, right? Don't invest in a lucky rabbit's foot, in a horoscope teller that can predict for you when something is going to be timed correctly, or buying someone's idea, or invest in funding from smart people. You want to invest in team and that ability to execute on missions. And so that was the whole point of that I think this is the top thing in your control. So let's not get lost in all this other noise. This slide that we had shared, this is 10 years ago, right? We still use this even last week's academy. We got, with all this work we did with the military, they always talk about team to mission and the connection of it. The stronger the team, the bigger the mission you can tackle. And by the way, the weaker the team, downgrade your mission, right? Like, you gotta at some point keep it realistic, because even big missions, if you don't touch success, it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
And the more you talk, like, God is gonna come down from the skies and relieve all of us, everyone's like, God, this person's delusional. And you don't see the good talent running away from you, right? Good talent knows how to latch onto and be around like teams that accomplish mission success. And big missions
That's
are
a good
very
point
difficult.
about upgrading and downgrading the mission based on what's happening, right? Because you're right, it is very demoralizing, but then also learning to upgrade the mission when things are working. That's the idea of pressing and momentum, right? So
Yes.
both, you have to be very aware of that's why SA now, situational awareness, situational assessment now is so critical. It's knowing when, we were talking this week with a team, like when you have to, we talked about this in our leadership academy last week, like when you have to downgrade to go to something a little bit easier, but then you always have to be aware of when things start to work, you start to get some momentum, how you press to then, combine those decisions into a set of 7 that all of a sudden now you have more success, and then you can breed more success. But actually being aware of when that's happening in critical junctures.
Some of you are listening to this and kind of like and that's why I like to have small ambitions and small goals, and have a very polite F you to that. Like, that's not living, right? Living is about doing big things and going after it. And so very much like, if you ever know Steve and Mike at weight training, right? I mean, they don't want clients who want little tiny muscles and stay tiny. They want someone who wants to go for big goals. It's called progressive overload. You want to constantly be pushing. Yeah. And that was a huge part of the learning we had working with Josh Waitzkin too. He was saying, it's fascinating human beings. There's an endless ability to upgrade. There is no ceiling. It's like endless. But this is the interesting but between levels, when you upgrade, you always do worse before you do better.
That's such an important.
But that window of doing worse is such a big ego hit. And people do my God, I'm going backwards. I'm going back to being Benjamin Button, down to becoming a child again. And they flip out. I'm like, Jesus, that's just how it works. You play golf and then you change your grip. You're going to do worse before you do better. It happens every time, but people can't stand that. So as a result of it, they'd rather just bail and go back to the old ways. But that there's all these interesting insights. This was a simple thing. I think that was a different jargon, but it was a picture usually of a car. We have a picture of a car burning out, which is when the wheels are spinning. if you step on the gas while having your foot on the brake, the car will burn out and you will ruin your engine and your wheels and the whole 9 yards. But this was another one we got from the military. I love the simple formula that performance as an execution success equals your potential minus your impediments. Now, most of us don't like to think about impediments. In fact, it's called weaknesses, right? Like it's an actual US word that's invented, weakness, versus I think in schools they call them glows and grows.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
was like, what the hell is
I have
that?
to
They
think
sound the
about that for a
same,
second,
right? Like glow is, I think, good, right?
Yes, yes.
And grows is supposed to be weaknesses. And I'm like, you know what? Some weaknesses suck so badly, you're never going to grow for a long time. And to know that it's painful,
Yeah.
it's difficult, and to just spray perfume, right? An investor of ours who passed away, he was the head of wealth management at JP Morgan Chase, and he would say, God, we're just masters of spraying perfume on shit, right? Like, so is a lot of teachers, to be honest, at schools, right? Impediments suck, right?
Yeah.
Like, they suck for you the most, but trust me, everyone around you is suffering from your impediment as well. And to recognize that it is a detractor in all your potential.
Yeah.
And if you do not know how to take your foot off the brake or release, like, and reduce the impediments,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how good you are. Your score as in performance will still be 0. And if you do the math right, it can actually be negative some number, right? That's how bad impediments are. And understanding how things fail is experience, is wisdom. And to be able to spend time connecting with other human beings, to share the failures, like, because that's how we can help each other recognize these things. It's a hard thing to do. Now, TED Talk speakers call that vulnerability. And I'm like, the military hated that word. So we came up with, like, burning it off. Like, let us burn off our impediments together. Just talk about it. Like, go into it in detail. And that notion of not an armchair professor thing, but like in the trenches, the nuances of how these things happen, occur, the forks. That's very difficult to do, but doing that is actually the exposure of impediments is one of the most powerful things with other human beings, by the way, who are also in the trenches. Because having an impediment discussion with an armchair professor, it's like, oh my God, I'd literally rather, put my finger in my mouth and throw up 12 times in a row than do that. So not a fun thing to do with armchair professors. All right, so mistakes and lessons learned. 5 things are covered here. Remember, it was team and advisors, but I changed the topic to mentor relationships, but there's a lot of other things, so we'll just add it on. Number 1, reasons why advisor mentorship relationships fail. Reason why founder relationships fail. Reason why hiring fails, reason why firing fails, and then which advice to take or not. This is a really important one. And a lot of entrepreneurs know. In fact, the best startup institutes train people to pummel them, and they say they do this on purpose, which I don't really know. 99% horrible advice, just so they learn the skills of how to have discernment, right? And I was like, wow, that's
Like
a really,
deliberately?
yeah, that's what they claim. And I'm like, I think it's just because you have shitty advisors.
Yeah, I'm not
And they're
sure
like, no,
that's-
it's undeliberately. I was like, no, that, I was
No.
like, you have back-to-back shitty, and are you ever going to have some good ones? They're like, all deliberate. But there is a truth to it. And I think with the internet now, right? Our Alfred Maria always says,
Internet.
where'd you learn this? The internet.
Internet.
Well, the internet is providing so much advice
Yes.
that we are surrounded by nothing but absolutely crappy advice, and to discern what is valuable, very difficult to do, right? Which is what we call judgment, right? Or leadership decision-making. And then there's a 6th one that I just added, so 10 years later, right? Self-development and understanding the nuances and the breakout of it. So I'll touch on some of that from last week's Academy, and that's probably the biggest one I think that's important, that's kind of still in progress. All right.
Because
So-
don't you argue that one is the most in your control? I mean, if you go back to what
Yeah,
you're
the
saying
team
about
and advisors,
control, I
right?
mean, if the thing you have the
And by
most
the
in
way,
your control is
self-development.
yourself.
Self-development.
They always say,
Right.
even in marriages,
Yes.
it's like, don't try to change the other person, work on yourself, but we are always trying to change someone else.
Yes.
We're always trying to fix someone else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a
Oh, yeah.
list of ways that I can tell
Gotta
you.
turn that stuff inward.
I have a list of people internally that I need to develop, right? How about yourself?
Yeah,
No.
no, it's
I don't like to do that out in public, right? I like to do that in the shower by myself, right? only in front of a priest where I can like say a few things, but complete confidence, right? And the opposite being learning in public, actually recognizing that notion of you will do worse for you do better.
Yeah.
And I want to get better that badly. That I will swallow my ego, right? Okay, so I like this thing. It's actually a diagram I stretched wide because I think
I
this
know. We
is
made
a
'em look-
physical look.
Made
of
him look
most
thicker.
CEOs. Yeah,
Made him
no.
look thicker.
Most CEOs are totally out of shape, and that's not a good thing because they don't make good decisions. But I think this number might be higher, and I say CEO, but I think at this point with work from home and every piece of autonomy that we all have, I think an average human being probably has close to 100 decisions a day in front of you. Now, these numbers that I got, remember, this is Ram Shriram, who's the main investor and board member of Google, who's invested in our company, always gave me this years ago. And I'll tweak this a little bit. I remember Shiv Khemka, who's one of the top billionaires in India, spent time also on this. And I love when I went to India and was helping him coach these 300 like sort of to be Gandhi like trainees. And like they would like do okay, like they would get a B plus or an A minus. And this was like 2 a.m. Like they're like spending time brainstorming. And I'm thinking, I'm jet lagged, can I go to bed? And he's there himself hammering on them saying, like, why would you not go for the A? Come on, I can understand foregoing the plus. Don't the plus and the A plus, but come on, do you accept anything less than an A? And every one of them is like, hell no, back to the drawing board, 2 a.m. And I just watched this billionaire himself just nonstop till 2, 3 in the morning, hammering 18, 19, 21, 22-year-olds saying, A minus, not good enough. Like get the A, forego the plus, right? But this idea that mathematically 95 is the target that you should shoot for, meaning 95 correct decisions will make you an A leader, an A CEO. That means you get to get 5 wrong a day, right? But it also means you have to make 100 decisions. Most of us do 98 freeze, right? Another game in kindergarten, when they say freeze, 98 times we play freeze, and then we try to make 2 decisions, and usually they're like awful. And so they get close to 100 incorrect, which is kind of horrible. But then I put 80 or less because I was probably trying to coddle the entrepreneurs. But I remember Ram from Google was always like, if you score 85, you should be fired. You deserve to be fired.
A B CEO should be fired.
Yeah, B CEO should be fired, just full stop. And I was like, all right, like I get the standard. 95 is what I want, bare minimum. If I hit 85 as in 15 wrong a day, you should be fired. And that is the standard we hold leaders to. But we tend not to hold ourselves to that kind of standard. And we should. And I think we should more and more. Mentorship and how it fails. If you like Star Wars, I grew up watching it. So this is sort of, I think, Empire Strikes Back, right? This is the ultimate mentor, Master Yoda, with Luke, who had the Force in him, the power. And it's very fascinating because the way it works, like, you know, he has the Force in him, but if untrained, it becomes the dark side. And they always say idle minds is the devil's workshop. I think most of us human beings right now suffer from too much idle minds, devil's workshop. And so how do we instead train that force in us to do great things? These are the stats 10 years ago. I am assuming it's much worse now, that 96% of mentor-mentee relationships fail. 4% succeed. I believe the numbers are even smaller now. So this idea that like people say, I just find a mentor. Everyone's like, I need a mentor, I need a mentor. And I'm like, you suck as a mentee, right? Even if you got one, it would fail by the stats in the market. This is not easy to do, right? 4% is a really hard stat. It's the 80-20 rule applied twice, right? 20% and then 80-20 is 4%. That's how small an actual lasting relationship is. So maybe some tips. Simon Sinek is another individual. We actually housed him and his whole staff in our offices for 2 years. And we spent a lot of time talking about this notion of give and take. And give and take can have such a nasty connotation of quid pro quo, you know, matcher relationships. Adam Grant, even before he became famous, we got to know him very well. That first book he had about give and take.
Give and take.
Oh, give and take. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So, and there's a notion that the most successful people in the world are givers. But the least successful people in the world are also givers, right? Actually, Jared just left, but he needs to hear this because the people who are like, I love helping. I just love helping. They're usually heading to be the least successful people at the very bottom. And if you're going to be in the middle, they're called matchers or takers. A taker, we've met them, we hate them. A matcher is like, if you pay for dinner, or if I pay, you'll pay next time. And those people who calculate that matching are seen as same as takers. But the very top, so we would write givers in capital versus givers in lowercase.
You would
at
say
the
the
bottom.
big G versus the little
Yeah.
G of giver, the difference.
The big G givers are not calculating. They are giving, and they're giving to add value to somebody else. But over long term, it is a give and take relationship that occurs. So they're constantly doing rigorous selection of the right who. It's almost like they're always like running a professional sports team, and they're always screening for the best talent around them. And so just kind of understanding the give and take, this lesson one. The take is the mentor contribution to you. Give is the contribution to the mentor, which oftentimes kind of feels like, how would I? They know more, they have so much. It's not quite true. And so we'll give you some of the basics. So just kind of simple tips. First thing, right? Just first meeting. I put 3 tips to succeed. So I'm like remembering this. Okay. So, oftentimes I cannot tell you, do not waste the mentor's time, right? Their time, like, just to be very honest, is far more valuable than yours. So this idea of our 411, right? Just kind of a little background vital of yourself, month, year, company founded, or if it's this for founders, right? But like number of employees, location, engineering, sales mix, fundraising stakes, what keeps you up at night? This whole notion, if you want a short 1 or 2 pager, in fact, we set up programs having our leaders mentored by Brene Brown, mentored by Simon Sinek, mentored by all these famous people. And the top thing we did was we helped them create this 411 so that before going on and wasting an entire hour on the basics of background, it's like, boom, you did the homework, they got it. Like, it's amazing just by
Get productive right
educating,
away.
right?
Yeah.
Educating them, you skip all this stuff, right? Okay. This, I can't tell you, is the simplest thing. I was given this advice early on. How much time do we have? Just because you booked an hour meeting doesn't mean you have an hour.
Yes.
Something comes up, they're like, we have 15 minutes. I cannot tell you how many times you meet someone and you're thinking you're entitled to the time that's in the calendar or the Zoom. It's not what happens, right? And the more important they are, their schedules wreak havoc, right? And so you'll see that just knowing and confirming how much time doesn't let you spend like, oh, I just want to tell you all about this nonsense chit chat I want to do before I get to the meaty stuff in the last 5 minutes of the hour. You won't even get to the hour. And so understanding kind of the time bounds and just making that a habit, super important. You'll also see the most important people, they'll be like, I don't know, like a few minutes, 10 minutes. If you're interesting, you can talk to them for 4 hours, right? And so that's when you also know you win. But so there's all these elements, a simple thing kind of matters a lot. All right, so how to build trust versus how to erode trust. Building trust, vulnerable is a word that is so misunderstood. I almost dislike it because people know fake vulnerability at such a rep way that it kind of is actually far worse than I think even being vulnerable, because once you're discovered, they will now have to second guess and not trust you like potentially forever. Very dangerous.
Well, the acronym we created last week in the Academy, HOT, the humble, open, transparent, maybe that's, we should just write HOT as an update to this, the HOT, H-O-T.
I like it, actually.
That's the new, it's not the H-O-T-T-O-G-O song, but it reminds me of that every time we do it, we have like 2 dances to that now. But yeah, HOT standing for humble, open, and transparent. That's the new acronym we've added to our dictionary of
Yes, thanks to Big Papa. I like
1,000
it.
acronyms. Oh, Big Papa, that was yours? Oh, wow.
Yes. No, I like it. H-O-T-T.
Humble, open, and transparent.
Yes. Do it live here. So we're gonna
Do it
replace
live.
this word with hot.
That's cool.
Okay.
Well, the other first 2 words, humble is the second one, so it's okay. Replace
Okay.
the first 2.
Sorry.
Okay, so it's just recall and follow through, okay.
Both of these.
There you go.
These overused nonsense words, right? I say nonsense, but sometimes when they get overused, it means nothing. Everyone's like, I'm so humble, I'm so vulnerable. I'm like, you're saying nothing to me now, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, let's all be hot, right?
right,
Um,
that's good.
Grateful,
Like grateful.
follow through. I can't tell you number 4 is probably where most people fail. On the right side, guarded. Like this notion of like, I'm taking my time to help you, and it's like trying to pull out wisdom teeth. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm not a freaking dentist. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't bring Novocaine, and honestly, I don't have the time
yeah.
to pull out your teeth and hear you scream. Like literally, like it's like very annoying. On the arrogant side, right? You want my help, but you want to tell me how great you are. I'm like, like then go puff up your chest somewhere else, right? This is a common thing. We're going to talk actually this later session tonight. We're going to have it's called CIA, Capital Introductions Advice. This is kind of like the top thing people do. Ask for money. They don't give money. You have any introductions you can make? And then you move to advice. And I remember when I was very, very young, kind of young now, but even younger, there was like a piece of advice. I think it must be a Jewish person. It's a Jewish saying that if you ask for money, they give you advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. So of course, people take that and they get annoying with their advice asking. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Meaning
like
they're gaming
every
it
time.
to try to get
Of
money.
course. It's good. Fake is the worst, right? Anything you do fake will cost you dearly in the long term. And if you don't see it as that toxic.
Rob Pfeiffer is saying I am Jewish, and that is very true.
Yes.
I did not hear that.
I think I heard this from a very wise Jewish woman, but,
I thought you were gonna do the Bridgerton Shivers,
Oh, no,
whatever
no,
that phrase
that's
is.
a-
It means it's meant to be in Jewish, some language, I don't know.
but
Anyways,
some language.
not
think
Jewish
it's called
language,
Hebrew.
sorry, Hebrew,
Hebrew,
yes,
yes.
Hebrew, sorry.
Flaky. Flaky is like a top thing that shows up.
Good.
And for those who have any success mentoring people, it is just maddeningly annoying having flaky mentees. Like kind of,
What do you mean by flaky?
I don't
Just
know.
not
I
late, not
mean,
showing up,
There's a
not
gazillion
following
ways to
through.
be flaky.
Yeah.
Right? You can be late. You can, I don't know, like you can be disheveled. You could have, I mean, just
Yeah.
everything is a mess,
Yeah.
right? You're shifting,
Just a hot
canceling
mess.
this and that, like
Instead of hot in a good way, it's hot mess.
a hot mess.
Yeah, it's a mess of hot open shit. Sorry. You call it a hot mess. You say at the bottom, done right will result in relevant advice. It's your takes. If you do this right, you'll get the right advice. It's so true, Charlie. I remember you used to always say situationally, it's like, what do you need right now? If you're not coming in open, which is the opposite, guard would be the opposite, and looking for, you would start right away with what you're trying to do, try to figure out, you try to maximize that time, getting to the point, right? Like, not, guarded and arrogant
Yeah,
and all that stuff.
and we've coached so many people over the years, and it's like.
That's hard to do, right? That
That
actually
is-
does take training to
but-
get to a place where you can just like, but that's ego aside. I'm mission focused. I'm coming in my business. I'm mission focused. I need to figure this out. And so you'd be more open, you'd be more transparent. You would actually.
I mean,
do
I
all the
can't
right
tell you
things.
how many people we've coached where it starts all like,
Yeah.
they sound like amazing. Why do you even need help? And then suddenly the minute even they sense, wait, I think this mentor knows more than the average person.
Then
They just start
opening up.
loading out like kind of, you're like, what kind of mess is going on there? And that was always there. And so that notion of like, just like, help the mentor do research in you, but you should do your research on mentors. Like I said, 99.999, complete waste of time and advice that could actually kill you, right? Kill you in many ways, whether it's health or financial ruin or whatnot. How to give. This is one of the worst ways that people do to the mentors. Is there some way I can help you? I mean, every single time, oh, I want to help you. I'm like, for the 12th fucking time, right? This is all you could say. How can I help you? On the right side, first, do your homework.
Hold on, Charlie, this is a mentor asking,
This is a mentee.
mentee asking a
Mentee.
mentor, how can I help you?
Oh,
Yeah.
all the time. How can I help you? 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 I'm like, mother, just first do your homework. I remember even like, how many mentees will sit down with a person where everything is online in their bios and they'll say, kid, tell me about your background. You didn't even look up and do that research. It is so simple. And so do your homework, right? Don't start by asking about their background. One way to find out what someone's challenge is what are you working on? Now, I hate, by the way, training people to ask these trick
Yeah,
questions.
that's like.
And so it's a game of disingenuous
Yeah.
trick questioning. So for those of you who love these questions, I'm like, God help you. But
Mhm.
so don't mistake that by accident. But there is a way to
Yeah.
find out, right? Some of their biggest challenges. And it's like,
I think at the high level, Charlie, just making me think about, we've talked about this over the last few years too, just, you have to if you want help from someone, you truly want their help, then you have to make their problem your problem, right? To actually create like a mutual give and take, you have to be, if you want them obsessing on your problem, like say there's an entrepreneur and we're obsessed about how to help them, if there is, and it feels like, wait, why would the entrepreneur or maybe a founder or somebody who's struggling spend time thinking about the mentor? But that is what a relationship is. Otherwise, it's not a relationship.
Yeah.
That's not a relationship. That's just,
I mean,
know?
I cannot tell you how many people do that. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? I'm like, I get free coffee in the office. Can I buy you lunch? No, I get free lunch too. Can I buy you a drink? No, I don't want to go out. Like, and they'll say, can I get your time? And I'll say, I'm gonna be honest right now. No. There's a part where,
because the reality is
Like-
mentors also struggle, have challenges, like they're human too. So if you
well,
don't understand what
I
those
don't-
things
I don't-
are.
No,
Okay.
I look at the best ones have discernment,
Mm.
right? The worst ones say yes to everything. Oh, you want my advice? Sure, I'll give you my advice. People who want to give you advice left and right, I'd say like run. Because nobody wants to listen to them. It's like the spouse doesn't want to listen, their children don't want to listen, so they feel like kudos and speaking to strangers and giving advice, run. Like my advice to you is run. Like the harder they are to get time with, the more valuable they could be. Not always though. There are a lot of assholes too. So you gotta kind of realize this is not like a perfect human game. But the notion of, I mean, when I say yes and I mentor someone, I'm not even kidding. I lose sleep over them. Like I will wake up in the middle of the night scribbling notes on this individual and the details of stuff happening in their life. And so as a result of it, I'm constantly puzzling and solving like what their needs are everywhere I go. I'll be in the middle of the most important meeting on a huge, like multi-million-dollar contract. And I'll be like, oh my God, I have to scribble a note. I have an idea for Albert, right? And I'll like literally scribble it down.
Yeah.
Dead serious.
But that's why you're very selective, because you can't do that for everybody. I think that's what you were saying before, like someone like Jared needs here too. Like if you take on too many, mentees, now you really can't help anybody because you can't puzzle.
If
these-
you remember
If you're
the
trying to help
days-
them with the biggest challenges and the biggest problems, if you want to help everybody just a little bit, and I think people do feel good, right? When they can help many people a little bit, but they're not going all in on a few people to truly make a difference.
It's
I think
kind of
it's-
like, I remember this distinct thing in college where I was dating a bunch of girls at the same time.
Oh my
I
God.
know, and then remember
Oh,
Blockbuster
I'm
days,
judging.
right? So I've gone to
That was so
Blockbuster,
bad.
and you ever have one of those, hey, have we watched this movie together? And they just go like berserk on you
Yeah.
because you don't remember
You guys are
if you
such
watched this
show-offs
movie
right
with
now.
them
It's
or
so
somebody
gross.
else.
You guys,
Like-
it's so gross. You're showing off about how many girls you're dating at once.
No, but I'm saying the movie, like, but I'm telling you, that's like what
You didn't say
mentoring
the
is
movie, you
like.
said you did it.
No, I said,
Oh,
you go, so you
oh.
weren't listening to a word.
Oh.
Blockbuster, you go and you were like,
I
did I
didn't say
watch
you
this
did, I
movie
was-
with you? Right?
Yes.
That is the same thing with mentor
Yeah.
whores, right?
Yeah.
Did I give you this advice?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Compare yourself to a horse?
no, I was in college. This is like,
okay.
I'm like 30 years out now,
It's
so,
okay.
you grow. you know? Like some of us start that way. But no, as a mentor, you'll find a lot of mentor whores, right?
Wait, say the mentor whore is what, Charlie? Is a mentor
Did I help
who-
you on that? Like, that
Oh,
whole
yeah.
notion of they don't even remember you.
Yeah, that's gross. That's
You're
gross.
simply a
That's
number,
gross.
right?
That's gross.
And they are proud of, you happen to be mentee 1002, right? They just almost have a body count of mentors, or
Yeah.
sorry, or like mentees. It's bad.
It's like,
Anyways, I digress, not the point. We have more good tips. This is kind of important, and I think one of the most important ones, to be honest. How often to meet? I think the best and fastest rhythm usually is monthly, but even that can be too much. But 6 to 8 weeks apart is a fascinating schedule for a couple different reasons. Most mentors aren't growing very fast. So as a result of it, if you saw them a month later, they'll say the same stuff. 6 to 8 weeks is a month and a half to 2 months. If you meet them and they say the exact same thing, I can't remember in my notes if this was actually for the mentee or the mentor, but there's an element where growth matters on both fronts.
oh, yeah.
The person who's mentored, right, the mentee, like you meet with me and nothing changed, it's kind of like it's a waste of a high quality mentor's time. But a lot of mentors, when you meet them, you'll see there's a famous saying that for most consultants, all the value they could possibly provide, you'll get in 2 hours or less. Every other hour after is just repeating that same thing over and over again with different synonyms, right? Like, have you looked at this from a strategic point of view, a financially profitable point of view? Is it scalable? Like blah, blah, blah. Do you have the mission, the blah, 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 the blah, blah. It's like just, that's the typical individual. And you'll see the best ones. And I mean, I've had the fortune or sometimes the disfortune of having too many at times over the years. But the best ones, I mean, oh my God, you'll meet them like a month later and they'll be like, you know what I told you? Totally wrong. This is better. Like the speed that they themselves are growing is just nonstop. So you're benefiting from just their spillover, right? It's like a cup overflowing. Like when you find those, my God, like just invest in whole into those because they're just like endless stream. It's like gonna like a, you know, it's like paying like $100,000 for what is now not Harvard or Stanford. None of the schools are cutting it, but like a true education that is just incredibly valuable. There is nothing more valuable than having an amazing mentor where you can literally even just pop an email or text, ask like, what do you do in this situation? And the accuracy of their calls is shocking. That's like a lifeline. Every decision, right? Like it could be like with your child, with your spouse, with your parent, like, or like everything else in your life. And this is kind of like so dumb, but so,
Actually, this is a
I mean,
really,
this
really
is
good
like
one.
the dumbest thing that like, sorry.
So having seen Charlie have, you know, dozens of mentors at the highest level, the most senior people, and it just feels like in the world mentoring him, guiding him. And I was more junior before I was co-CEO, but even after, watching how you, so you earned, I would think about it like you.
She's 3.5 years younger.
Almost 4 years.
I've been
But-
on planet Earth 3.5 years.
It's a long
longer than
time.
that.
It's a long time. He was raising
Explains.
money, he was raising
No,
money, he was
the
doing all
gap
these
in
things.
wisdom.
I
literally,
was
it's
still
just-
in
I
college when he
mean,
was raising money, but it doesn't matter. It's,
No,
no, it's awesome.
I'm gonna
Catch-
find the
catch
number.
again.
So good.
You can actually figure out the number date, March 3rd to July 20th, whatever those
Is
number
it
of
3
days
days?
are. No.
It's around 1,277. So let's just
Oh,
say
number of days. total.
1,200 more
I think
days, just contact sporting, right?
Contact
Megan?
sporting, contact.
If you ever see a
sporting.
gap in wisdom,
But I would say as a mentee, I did this stuff too.
I know,
I'm just
no,
saying.
but-
That's why I'm where I am, because I was a good
I
mentee.
never said you want.
Just saying, I'm being very defensive right now.
Yeah.
I was trying to give you a compliment.
It's called
Um,
ego.
I was trying to give you a compliment.
Just
No, but I would
totally-
know.
Totally natural.
Wait, what is what?
Ego. Sorry.
Anyways, I would know, I got a big one.
1,200
I
days.
do have a big ear. The compliment though, you can give to a mentor is following up on their advice. I've never seen, it was crazy, like the number of meetings, discussions, mentorship, investors, whatever it might be, how quickly Charlie would put into practice the advice they gave him, and you have to translate it. It's not like a mentor is gonna say, write this email, do this, send this, pitch that, do whatever. No. It's like a translation of their advice. I think that is probably the skill that's,
Which
maybe we
only,
can talk about that, but like how to translate advice into practice, try it, do it aggressively, show them, and actually keep them transparent in the process so they can see. It feels really good as a mentor, right? To see somebody's taken my advice, translated it, is trying it, and then sharing with me, because then as a mentor, you can tweak it, you can help them, it feels real, that's like
Mhm.
it's a good feeling, right? To feel like somebody is
I'll-
taking
I'll-
what you're
I'll give it-
giving, taking their time that they
Yes.
gave you, and then doing something with it, and sharing with you what's happening, so they can even help you if it's not, it's awesome.
I mean, the
It's such a
best
good
compliment, the
feeling.
best compliment I've had as a mentee, I mean, some of the mentors I've had are like CEOs of Fortune 100 companies themselves, saying, instead of monthly, can we meet weekly? And I was
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
can't, like, come, like,
Yeah.
they're like weekly, I could add value weekly.
Yeah,
And I'm like, but I need to translate and put things into practice. All I'm gonna do is spend time meeting with you, like,
right.
but it's a
Too much.
signal of, and it's not about like kissing their ass. The amount of times I've gone to mentors and challenged their advice and thinking in nuances, and they would scratch their head and saying, shit, I've never seen that. And then I would explain how it happened and whatnot, and then they would get a learning on top of their
I was gonna say, but that's
advice.
where they would learn, and that feels really good, right? To actually be learning from a mentee, not just feeling like you're doing stored fat and teaching and sharing
Yeah.
something that you've known, and it's kind of like a lot of the big TED Talk speakers say they feel number, the more they give the same speech, the more they're like, I just feel number and dumber, right? Because you're not learning, but this idea
And-
that you would learn
And,
from a
and,
mentee.
and so, by the way, some of you will go back and say, oh my God, I gotta now have writing a book report on my to-do. Like, there are many ways to communicate, and a book report is not the only way, right? Meaning sometimes a tiny little thing and this idea of viscerally when something happens.
You have to
Like,
share.
that notion of like, when you do something, you're like, oh my God, thank God I had an angel on my shoulder
Yeah.
who gave me this advice, and because they'd seen around corners, I made a better choice. Like, those things matter, and being
Yeah.
able to not say, thank you, God bless, thank you. It's like, what, for what? Like,
Yeah.
the details matter, and you get better with more reps.
Yeah.
But I cannot tell you how many mentees, and I'm not even exaggerating, I have come back and they're telling me this amazing difference in their life, some of them 5 to 10 fucking years later. 5 to 10 years, not a word, right? And I'm like, I spent all this time with them, and literally they're like, that was a life-changing experience. I'm like, 5 to 10 years
It would be
later.
nice to know when the life-changing experience happens, so you
Yes.
can embrace the feeling good about it.
And so,
Get the
and I
serotonin
want to be
boost.
like, do you think if I added that kind of value 5 to 10 years ago, I might have more? And if you kept in touch, I could have helped you at an exponentially larger level. Instead, they're like, oh my God, changed my life. Thank you. I'm like, that's like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
5 years ago. This part,
I think you kind of already covered, this is the growing. Sorry.
no, I just try.
Yeah,
Look,
try.
just simply, like the idea, what could I possibly give a mentor? They have everything, I have nothing. Just try, right? Just even trying, genuinely trying matters. People like, oh, I have nothing. They have that whole scarcity mindset. I have nothing, you have everything. So they don't even try. And it's amazing, just trying. And you get better at it the more you try. So I was looking for all kinds of advice, except just, as Yoda would say, there's no do, just try, right? Try.
No, dude, just try.
Lesson 2, founder relationships fail because they're growing at different rates. This is something founder 1 growing like hell, founder 2 stagnated in place. And the bigger the gap, the worse it gets, and the tension gets worse and worse. To recognize it and then try to get, once again, I hate the idea of founder 1, please slow down so founder 2 can catch up. Does not work that way. Any elite team, right, does not actually beg the person who's in front to go slower so they can catch up. No, instead they try to elevate. There's like bantering, trash talking. Like, we had this whole discussion in the class about dance. I mean, Megan has clearly had more reps and experience, even like dancing for sport through school. I have not, but I grew up in Africa. I got things in my genes and roots
compete.
that,
No,
like
it's
give
true.
me an advantage. And
No,
so-
without question, I look at this, there are times where I'm like, if Charlie's ahead of me, I'm like, "God, if you would just, it's, that feeling of, when you were saying before, team to mission, sometimes you have to downgrade the mission based on team. I do feel that way sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, like I can't, it's almost like rising to the level that Charlie's at. Except for dance, of course, you gotta rise to my occasion, but it's been 5 years of
I was saying, but look what Megan sees that
like,
I
geez, I can't
did
get
this
that move.
move better than Megan. Oh,
It's so rare.
that's pure Eden,
It's-
pure Eden.
It's
That
pure.
look of, wow, I just beat a professional dancer cheerleader, right? It's like amateur coming out of nowhere.
He likes to do that with professional, like he's competing. I'm not, it's a cheerleader for Christ's sake.
It's all
but-
relative
But
terms.
still, I was told last
You did
week
it
that
as
I
a
was
sport.
stage ready by someone whose wife is a dancer.
Who was hoping that we would sponsor and
I
give them funds,
know,
but
it
yes.
doesn't matter. I got a
Savvy husband.
compliment and it felt right at a moment of Eden. But the whole growing at different rates, like this is like a real thing. In the sense of like downgrade the mission for team, but
Yeah.
what you do, Charlie, is you're pushing to, to rise,
Yeah.
right? Which
No, I
is
want
like the
people
taunting and
elevating
the
up. None of this like, I'm
competitiveness.
gonna go
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
go lighter so that you can catch up and feed your ego. No.
Yeah.
Hey, elevate up.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a great guy, I forget his name, but I remember like the way he was teaching his teenage daughter how to play tennis. He would whip the ball so freaking hard at her, and the daughter would be pissed, like getting hit.
Yeah.
Dad, what are you doing? When she went and played with the French, she just kicked ass. She was used to the ball coming at her so freaking hard, right, from a
Mhm.
grown adult. Like, just killed it. Like, that's the part you don't realize. Training, like, they say even in the military, those who basically like die in training survive on mission. But those who actually are like, I've never been shot once in training, actually always die in mission. Like, you need to train hard.
Sadie, I don't know which part you're saying is spot on, if it's this burnout slide, what was the one before you just did the founders growing at different rates? I'm not sure which one, but yeah, I don't know if it's that one or this one, but keep going. But the burnout slide, yeah, this came from the
Yeah.
book that we were put in by Harvard, the
Yeah,
DEO.
Robert Keegan's one of the
Such a good
top
quote.
professors, top adult psychologists in the world. And I think this is one of the biggest insights, that in the research, burnout does not come from overworking. Long hours overworking is not how burnout occurs. It's in the research, in the data, that occurs from basically not growing. If you are doing something and you're not improving, right? You're investing money, time, energy, and you're stagnating. And nothing is changing. That's where burnout occurs.
It just made me, I haven't read this quote in like years, but this last part, and then imagine working in a setting where you have to hide your weaknesses rather than having a regular opportunity to overcome them. Made me think about the work we did last week in the academy about psychological safety and talking about how it's not the organization that has to give it to you, right? You're not entitled to that safety. You create it. That's an empowering, right? That's a very empowering versus a lot of people say, well, I don't have it at my company, so I can't do that. You have to create it. If you're new to our leadership and practice class, we've been talking about how it's up to you to create that, right? You have control with your authenticity, which we're talking about program 2, level 1 of our training of mod 4, which is to bring your authentic self, like to actually go into the hard things, to not, hold those things back, because it's hostile, and it creates an environment that the other person doesn't want to open up to you either, but you can say, well, they're not sharing with me the real stuff, so I'm not going to do that. No, it's up to you. But yeah, no, I haven't read that quote in a long years.
So lesson 3 is around hiring. I think it's a lot less hiring these days, so I'll just kind of flag this one.
Yeah.
The part of interviewing for the smartest and most driven, that was actually what Amazon was doing. It's coming from Jeff Bezos. It was what Google was doing. And we got this from Ram, who's our investor, but sat on both their boards. Google's methodology, initially, I think up to like almost 10,000 employees, some huge number. Sergey and Larry, the 2 founders, had to interview every single candidate. And their rule was every person must have at minimum 11 interviews. And unless you get 11 thumbs ups, you're not hired. Even a single thumbs down, you weren't getting into Google. But we found over iterations that was wrong, because it's often 11 first dates. So the people you end up hiring are what I call pickup artists. They're really good at being smooth and convincing you on a first date. If you ever had a second date with them, you'd be like, hell no, no more with this person. And so there's a notion of depth that matters, more than just wide breadth. So let's see, biggest mistakes, top lesson, lean equals success, fat equals failure. This theme showed up everywhere. Startups with no resource achieve amazing things. Then you give them money and they just blow it all, right? Lots of resources almost always fail. There's a guy we met, he was the head of, he's like what do they call the CIO, the chief investment officer, or the research officer? Either way, they drove the investment for one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And you're saying every company they ever invested in, whenever they had too much capital, they always fail. And the way they fail is it takes something that's mediocre and just do a lot more of it.
Yeah.
So they scale mediocre things. Every company who succeeded from scarcity, succeeded because they had nothing. As a result, they had to innovate. And then whatever they produced was amazing. And so this notion of innovation occurs under constraint, not under like having abundance. Less is more, and more is most times not better. Desperation equals bad judgment calls, right? And so this was tied to recruiting, that you have to always be recruiting for one main purpose, to have options and choices, so that you're never desperate. Anytime you make a hire under desperation, it is no different than if you ever go and date someone desperate. And it's like, God, you're gonna get hurt, like just badly. They'll be like, maybe you should pay again, Oh, sure, I'd love to pay. I'd like to pay. Maybe I'll give you some money extra just in case you want to eat something afterwards. Like, you just get abused. You just make bad calls, right? And then this was a fascinating discussion I had with Sukhinder, who opened 19 of Google's offices globally. This notion of you had to always dual track, especially when you hire senior people. You have to look for senior talent, but also train from within. And it was fascinating. She opened 19 of Google's initial offices, and every single office, it was like all foreign countries. She hired the top executive recruiting firm and said, find me the absolute best. And they're recruiting for like 6 months, 9 months. In the meantime, she found someone inside the company and said, you are absolutely not qualified, right? You do not have the skills, you do not have the experience, but I'm going to put you in this role and I'm going to coach and mentor you until we make a hire, right? Did it in parallel. And so I remember asking Sukhinder, so kind of what happened? 19 offices. How many are now run by the executive recruiting firm hire? How many actually by the person you mentored? And she like paused and scratched her head and she was like, because every place, we definitely hired the senior person that we've spent money hiring. Holy shit, everyone didn't work out. Every single office is run by someone had mentored from within. Like now that doesn't always happen either, right? You can get some real spoiled brats from within. So like you kind of need both, but options and choices, right? Desperation, you have to recognize is a really ugly look and makes you do bad things. Lateral hiring is like dating. The same person should interview date 1, date 2, date 3, and advance only if. Human beings are the best judge of other human beings. Don't rush it. Time brings out the truth. Bad hires are more common than good. Now, I had added a piece here, coming back to growth. Always look to expand capabilities, and I mean people capabilities. It starts with self-growth, right? Increase my own leverageability. Then use AI agents, use tech, use collaborations, use remote workforce. The very, very last thing I would do is full-time hires. And this advice is a 2025 advice. In this order, hands down, I don't think it's even in question. And so just recognizing this entire shift of just headcount and hoarding more headcount does not equal more power. It simply equates to more cost and a shitload more mental head cases that are now your responsibility.
Something you
right?
said last week in the Leadership Academy was every time you're upgrading yourself, you have the opportunity to upgrade the mission. It's like this idea that you brought a new tool to the war, brought a new tool to the game. But I think it's really common to think somebody else is going to solve this, right? It's almost like it's sort of this notion of like not betting on yourself, right? Somebody else, and some other company or some other organization or some other person or some other hire or something else. And it's not to say you're not looking for that always, right? But to constantly be working on yourself, it's like that feeling of, oh my God, I can dance, We were talking about that.
Megan,
last
it's
night.
funny to hear
Yeah.
you say that, right? After just a few moments ago, we talked about how quick Charlie could be moving
Yeah.
at that pace and whatnot, right? And it's like, just in collaboration with what we talked about last week, when you upgrade yourself, right, and you upgrade the mission, now your team is being upgraded, right? And you're not necessarily having to coddle everybody to upgrade everybody, but just remind everybody, like, yo, we're on fucking mission.
Yeah.
Like, don't be surprised I'm moving fast.
Yeah.
We're on fucking mission here.
Right, we're on
Yes.
mission,
And it just goes to like,
yeah.
what you guys were talking about earlier.
Yeah, the way, by the way, I look at full-time hires, I want you to think, when you, not that any of us are going and adopting children, but I think about when you adopt a child, you adopt everything about them, right? Every nuance, every quirk, every good and bad, every piece that actually even grows with it. That's a full-time hire. You are now responsible for all of it.
Yeah.
All of it, from home issues, health issues, psychological issues, and not only what it is now, but as it's growing as you spend time with them. So most leaders, most CEOs will say, my God, I have just a basket of just every issue imaginable is taking all their time. I'm like, why do you keep thinking the next hire is going to make it better? You're just adding it, right? So it just gets worse and worse. So learn to operate with much less, and you'll see the world has changed a lot. The ability to do stuff now with just even one individual in AI, one individual in tech, it's like different level. Let's see. It's interesting about hiring. So when we met Ram, the reason we brought this guy on board actually was only because we wanted to learn how to recruit engineers. And he had said, this is going back to 2006. It's crazy how far back that is now, right? It's like 19 years or almost 20 years.
19 years.
Yeah, 19 years ago, right? We were introduced to him by Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. And in exchange for giving them a free look in our business, they said, I'll bring you the #1 guy who can help you build an engineering force. Ram was rated as one of the top guys with the Midas touch. Like he just, just made multi-billions across investments and whatnot. So we met with him, right? And his problem was, I don't make investments outside of, basically like
Like the
driving
Silicon
distance,
Valley
right? If I
area.
can't drive to you, like, in an hour, like, I'm not making an investment. I need to spend time. And he said, my sport is building billion-dollar companies. So like, so I said, nope, you guys are too far. So unless you want to move to San Francisco, answer is no. And he kept saying, the reason is you cannot build an engineering force outside of Silicon Valley. And he was pretty adamant, and the reasons why and everything. Eventually, like, I went to go see him every month for 8 months, and built the relationship. And as we built the relationship, he was saying the way you hire engineers is to go to college campuses, because internet and mobile is a sport most played by younger people. They just use it a lot more than older people. But high school, you can't legally hire, so it's college grads that matter, not even grad students, it's undergrads. But there's top 10 engineering schools in the US, and it's so damn competitive. It's worse than like kind of almost as bad as NBA professional sports. You'll never make it. Like, it just takes like, he's like, it'll take like 5 years to like get to be able to even recruit anyone of talent. And I was like, it'll take 5 years, then we better start right away. And we literally started picking his brain and started the process of investing in college recruiting. And we became the top 3 destinations out of MIT, Cornell, CMU, and Georgia Tech, which is 4 out of the 10 top schools. And we were getting over 10,000 engineering applicants a year to hire 10, maybe 15 a year. And so the caliber was through the roof. But here's the interesting part I learned. Now it took us 4 years to get there, as opposed to 5. So we got there a little faster, taking some of the advice he had given. But once you became number 1, right, as in one of the top 3 choices, turnover exploded. 40% turnover 2 years in a row. Meaning, if you have crappy talent, you're not worth poaching from. Once you have amazing talent and the talent density is there, like, it's a lot cheaper to recruit from you than to go and invest in this 4 or 5 year process. And then it moved eventually to like less than 1%. So attracting comes with then retaining as a challenge. But on the hiring front, this is what we learned, and I'll give you the little update from here too. What we learned was the student mindset was humility. The expert mindset, so we had these opposites, and we scheduled interview themes on how to do this. Those who are grateful versus those who feel entitled, and there are ways to pull that out during interviewing. Those who act with responsibility or those who are victims to everything, right? Kind of someone else's fault always for everything. This term investment and loss came from Josh Wakeskin, I love. Like, you're trying difficult things as an investment, as in you're doing difficult stuff consistently because it's an investment in loss. And I love that investment versus the know-it-alls who are always protective of their ego, right? Everything is, you made me look bad. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to feel like a fool. I'm going to erode my confidence. Now, as opposed to constantly making investments in loss. Now, what we learned over time, this is a 2025 updated version, humility can be faked, right? Humble bragging and stuff. And so we have people literally study how to fake humility. These stories of vulnerability, even crying during interviews.
Well,
and
no, we
everyone's
had an
like,
interview where we realized, oh my God, all the candidates, like, we have a Super Saturdays, we had like hundreds of next jumpers interviewing people, and we're all like, my God, these candidates are amazing. Their answers are like, wow, like, we just must have got the best crop, like, they're
Not
like
true, not true.
fire,
That's not what
no?
happened. That's not what happened.
No?
People were so amazed because they came to me saying, everyone answered every question perfectly, but
That's eerie.
something is eerie. See, that's the
Yeah,
human
that was the
judgment. Something is eerie because everything checks off, but something feels wrong. What we found then in candidate notebooks was they literally had how to answer every question, how to basically cheat the system in humility. So we changed eventually to what we call coachability. Now, coachability was a much higher bar. Demonstrated advice to learning to then improve same day. We would literally run interview days where they would get all this stuff and get feedback. They would have to build self-awareness, and then they would have to try again and actually improve on the same day. And those were very hard to find, but those are the best. So the ability to not only,
take feedback same day.
take
improve.
feedback,
Yeah.
improve, and show up in how they execute, that level of coachability became the most important. So that's kind of how it evolved. But that whole notion of, on the left, how Google interviewed, right? It's much better to go to first date, often is vital, second date, how things fail, third date. It's interesting. This is an interview that we came up with working with Simon. We call it the take interview. Why us? And you know what they'd say? Because you're great. I'm like, there's so many other companies are great. Why us? Oh, I want to do great things in the world. You can do great things anywhere. Why us? There's a notion that matters. Like, if you can't articulate why the relationship with us matters to you, right? As in, you have to have a take, right? Like, why us? Why'd you pick me? Why'd you pick us? And if you can't explain that, you could just
Say that
say
to
the same thing to anybody,
Yeah.
right? So there's a notion of these nuances that got better over time. So if you're hiring, some of this stuff may apply and maybe not anymore. So then comes firing, right? Now, this was probably, I'm turning 52 this year. So this was one of the hardest lessons I learned by 2009. So as we became top recruiting, and we had a whole no PR policy. The only place that people learned about a company actually was on college campuses. And we got to a place where we hired, a crap load of engineers. And then as a young CEO one day, I went through and said, like, at that point, I think we had 80 engineers, all college recruited, like top, full, perfect GPAs. And something was wrong. We had hired them all under the Google, Amazon standards. And I had a 10,000, all that stuff, but something was wrong. And so I remember taking our senior team off site and we put every person's name on a Post-it note. So every one of us had like 80 Post-it notes. And then we had to just viscerally separate those who I want to spend time with, hang out with, like work with, whatever, have a drink with, anything. And those did not. All hired under the same criteria of stunningly brilliant, driven engineers. And it like kind of split 50-50 despite being hired under the same criteria. And we're like, why is it? And we look for the themes, and that's how humility came in and whatnot. Even though they were hired, humility is often seen as a gene of like meekness. I'm so humble and they're so quiet and meek, versus humility ultimately was being open-minded to the idea of others. And that is a very hard thing to find. So we found the team that we didn't like didn't have humility. And so what did I do? Next day, called them all in and fired them all at once. What a mistake. We hired for humility, but if you do not help people hold dignity when you let them go, my God.
Hired humility, fire for with dignity.
Fire for dignity. And we learned years later with Bill Urey, this notion about the victory speech. You have to be able to write their victory speech. When they leave now, like we have them write the note they want to send to the company. And then we will go back and forth and they have to agree. They can't say, oh, Charlie sucks and that's why I'm leaving. Like, no, they write their victory speech or why they're leaving. And then we forward that to all the employees. But this was hard to learn and I saw them as toxic and got rid of them as quickly as possible. So can you imagine an average engineer coming out of MIT, Cornell, Carnegie Mellon, Georgia Tech, perfect GPAs. Most of them had close to 20 job offers when they were leaving. And they were still pinged continuously afterwards, saying, you change your mind, I'll pay you more money, and constantly. When you let that person go, they flip their mission, right? From engineering, building cool products to Charlie Kim is a dead man. And I think some I've heard still show up, even this is pre-COVID, at college recruiting, telling people, this was like 10 years after, do not join this company. So I'm gonna give you a flavor of what was on Glassdoor on Nextjob. Worst place to work should be called Next Live. Wouldn't wish this place on my worst enemy. If you want to grow and learn, go elsewhere. Toxic environment, backstabbing individuals that are not doing their own jobs. Save yourself, do not be the next to jump. Extremely long hours. The reason Nextjob was trained as trainer and food on premises because they don't expect you to go home. This was a hard lesson to learn. And it was one that, I think cost at least a decade. And it is something that I was a young, stupid CEO and did not know and just saw it as like, I got to cut the cancer out. And things play out over time, much harder than you think. And you know, there's a famous Gandhi quote of, first they ignore you, so you don't even exist. Then they mock you, and then they fight you before you win. This was one of the big lessons. When you let someone go, an ex-employee is the single biggest advertisement of your firm. Existing employees are biased. Everybody else doesn't really know the company. The ex-employee has been in the inside, right? So how you fire them is a representation of how you treat people. And that spreads further and faster than you realize. Timing. I think Albert in the academy I mentioned this. This is a lesson in timing. If someone leaves within 3 months, minimum disruption. People won't even remember their name, right? Within 3 to 6 months is the window where it's a real hard decision to make because the problems start showing up. The first 90 days, like they don't know anything. They can make every mistake. They try to apply value in the 3 to 6 month window. And so you'll see the first signals of issues. But most people say, give them more time.
Yeah.
A single day after 6 months, when they leave, and the more senior they are, the more painful it is. There is lingering pain. There is like residue that comes down with them going. They will have mentored people. They would have like all the stuff. And they say most people, I remember this one CEO that we hired out of the top advertising agency. He said, most people, you know, if they're right or wrong, 2 weeks. Now, that's a harsh 2 weeks, but he says 2 weeks. He said, but you hold on to them for 2 years. By the time you let them go, right? I mean, almost nobody says, yeah, I wish I let them go sooner. Or later.
Waited, yeah.
They all wish it was sooner. So this is a really hard thing to do. And this one, I'm not even sure I can get right. It's
Yeah.
just so hard. But it's just at least good to know what that looks like. All right, lesson 5. What advice to take or not? So it's classic on way long.
Yeah,
I had like
yeah,
a lot more slides. so-
Yeah, let's move
Okay,
on from some
okay.
of this, because I feel like this is less
Okay, so,
relevant,
well,
you
yeah.
know?
Well, this is, I think, the most important one.
This one is,
Sorry.
yeah.
Mentorship advice usually looks like this. It's too specific. Change the color. What happens when I push this button? Or it's too high level. Focus on growth. And so that's what usually crappy advice looks like. So there are 3 things I use to help get a litmus test. I want to know the origin of the advice. Was it learned in the trenches? Do they know it in their bones? Or is it something they read and they heard and they're just repeating some phrase that kind of they liked on a TED Talk or something? Are they growing as in the mentor? That's the 3 meeting rule, right? All the value in the first meeting, second meeting, stored fat, same advice, and then it gets repetitive. And you'll see by the 3rd meeting, you're like, that's the exact same advice, right? They're barely even listening. You can say all this stuff changed, they'll still give you the same advice. And so, once again, that's kind of, you have to invest the time to know. Now, this one, are they right or wrong majority of the time? I updated this one saying a solo mentor usually can get advice on your life and you right 2 out of 3 times. A team of 2 can do much better, right? And you'll see with Mega and I mentor people together, like the breadth of what we can see together, the questions and stuff can get up to 95% right. Now, the wrong mentors, they give you even worse than just whatever, mediocre advice. They give you advice that can kill you. And their advice is wrong 3 out of 4 times. So you can see, and by the way, the only way you know is over time, right? You listen to their advice, and I can't tell you how much of that I've taken. And on one hand, it's good to know. Like I said, the Founders Institutes and whatnot say we do it on purpose, right? Because it makes people learn how to play contact sports in real life. I'm not going to go through. So this is from. Sorry, there's a lot of slides we can do questions because I know I had a whole 6 section all on development, old and new.
School and work.
I mean,
and
this is Laura's
we would save it
versions,
for
and
next
she
week.
kind of like updated this, and then actually we had these are kind of cute from
pictures.
last week's academy. Some cool pictures, people in action. By the way, I gave everyone a sticker for their books. I want you to know, like, as I was going through thinking to filter out the best ones, I didn't want to give it. I spent 2 years buying these from Olivia with fake currency. Literally 1, 2, or 3 at a time. And so like, as people like took stickers for the thing, I had to like like Megan looked at me, just let him pick as opposed to, oh yeah, you can see, Deirdre's
Oh,
sticker.
Deirdre has a sticker.
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
it's so
So like, you don't understand, like I have my collection of the crappy ones
Yeah.
and so I just let you pick from my best. And I had like the mental thought in my head was I need to filter out the few, yeah, there's Steve's, the ones I wanted to keep. And then I found myself live doing that and then,
Let me see yours, Steve. I didn't see
Yeah.
it. Sorry, what did you get? Look, is there a reason where you get, what does it say?
Not now, when.
if not now, when?
Oh,
Oh,
oh, way
rac-
has.
raccoon.
Oh.
Where's a raccoon for
Interesting.
Wayway? Is that a raccoon?
Oh, can you show that video that was really funny about the, sorry, we have a funny video,
oh,
just
yeah,
it's
oh, yeah.
silly. It's
Sorry.
like a fun way to like, we could end this and then we can do some questions and discussion.
Oh, yeah, no.
But yeah, we were showing you pictures from the Leadership Academy. It was fun.
Let me
And the
play this
stickers
thing
was
for a
fun.
second.
But can we just play this
Yeah,
video?
no.
I think
was
this is
a-
funny, you guys. For those of you who like eating Mexican food and tortilla chips. I love this.
Oh,
We're back.
Yeah, we're
Yeah, I thought it was funny because we like do yeah, I love guacamole and chips. Who doesn't love good guacamole and chips? And there's a place like Charlie are working a lot on the weekend, so we go to like a Mexican place, and I look forward to like my margarita and my chips and
No,
salsa and guac.
and guacamole
and
is so healthy for you, right?
So
Superfood.
but it's only in moderation. Like I think we're supposed
40
to, by the way,
later each.
by the way, I think we're supposed to have a half an
Thank you.
avocado a day, not like even, I mean, if you're trying to like,
Right.
look good.
Right.
And so like I think we get like a big.
I don't know why,
large
they
piece of
seem
whole thing.
so thin and
But
so
the
healthy.
tortilla chips, you guys, if you take 4 and put them in a circle, that's one whole tortilla.
Did not
So,
realize that.
when you
never
keep
realized
eating that-
I've been cooking these in commercial spaces my whole life.
Didn't realize that,
And I'll
right?
cook them and I'll just snack right away. I didn't realize I was
Growing up, we used to eat
essentially
Mexican
eating
a
little
lot.
tortillas.
My dad would be like, another bowl of chips, please, with or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, at least 87, I mean, you're probably eating 87 chips.
Yeah, no.
Which-
I
Right before it, maybe having
I
20 to
can't wait to
40.
explain to my daughter who doesn't like tacos that she loves chips, that it's the same
Same
thing.
thing.
It's like
Isn't
one of
that
those,
funny?
like, just, I thought I'm eating a superfood avocado. I just had maybe 20 tortillas and I'm like wondering, God, it's like, I just feel
Then
so
we're-
full.
then
Must be
we're
the
like,
guacamole.
Why are we not
Nope.
getting more fit with Mike and Steve's
Yes.
protocol? Like,
Um,
what's wrong?
But by the way, I
Oh.
like this picture where,
Yeah, it's a great one.
one of the slides that I think Laura put on the left side, kind of if you look at factories and schools versus you look at how to work now, it's these pictures you can't quite see fully, but like brainstorming laying down, right? Like, it's so cool, look at walking around the office, seeing just teams of people who had never ever met,
Yeah.
brainstorming, laying down, writing upside down, it's cool stuff. We did a really cool event on mashing up the use of AI and Michelin cooking. And it like calculated who's your food buddy, you're likely to like same stuff, and did some
Yeah.
really cool stuff. And then, by the way, just exactly a month ago from this, not a month ago, a week ago, from this day, we came up with a new idea for the next first Thursday, which is March 6th. And, you know, we like I said, I didn't know Albanelli was actually a dance company, but like, we are doing this cool mashup just because we think dance is so important. It's actually good for brain health, top physical activity or brain health. And so we have 4 different groups that are gonna be just showcasing different genres of dance. I think we have.
So we have contemporary, we have ballet, we have Broadway, like burlesque, and then we have hip hop. I
Oh, yeah.
got like one of my most favorite, she was the choreographer
I
for
think-
our
I think-
Boston team's dance battles.
Yeah, They
for
always
years,
had
and
a
they
good
would,
dance
like,
battle.
They should have won probably every year, let's be honest.
She
like,
won, so you
oh,
can dance.
Yeah, she was on the thing, so
Yeah.
that's gonna be so cool, we're gonna have
But-
4 different kinds.
So it's gonna be cool, and then we're gonna challenge Danny to pair food with all the different kinds of dances, and so
Yeah.
I think Kathy's looking at like spotlights, and we've got more Marley floors coming, and she's gonna do really cool stuff for you to just experience, like pockets of different dances. And then Gio will do music and whatnot. I think it's just gonna be a cool experience. And then the other one we're looking at for potentially April first Thursday is a giant poker tournament. Where we'll do a poker tournament and the rules are like, I think we'll do maybe top prizes, whatever. And then you'll get, so if you're first place, you get like half the winnings, but then the other half you donate to a charity of choice. So we'll find like charitable ways integrate in. And I don't know what Michelin food gets paired for poker, but we'll figure that out too. And that'll be kind of a.
It's funny because we talked about.
He said chips, though. Chips.
Yeah,
Chips.
probably.
That was so good.
Tons of
That's good,
chips.
yeah.
87 tortillas later, right? So these are some of the things. The one piece, this is a slide from the academy, but as we iterate on top of the iterations, this is the top takeaway story routine within. But I like within courage reps, which is the hardest thing to learn versus avoidance reps. We added a nuance just last night. This is what most people are doing. We build a muscle to avoid difficulty, danger, and conflict. Versus how do you train what is so counterintuitive to us to go to difficulty, to go to danger, to go to conflict. Like, and think of every time you choose between two paths, the avoid path, you're actually building a muscle. Versus how do you train what is such a counterintuitive muscle to train? We see intellectual risk-taking as crazy as physical risk-taking.
Yeah,
Like it could kill you.
yeah.
And so the single biggest reason we don't, and we changed the word intelligence at the bottom to creativity, which is a much higher bar than intelligence.
Because it takes intelligence to be creative.
Yes,
But the
especially
outcome
in-
is creative, right?
Yes, but
Doing something that didn't.
but this precursor muscle, the problem is if you are not trained, right, you're not muscled to go to difficulty, danger, and conflict almost automatically.
Mhm.
You will see that your automatic is to absolutely all costs avoid difficulty, avoid danger, avoid conflict. And so as a result of it, you can't even come up with your creative options and choices. There's a couple more slides here. So that's a picture of my mom, but it's about the chips.
Oh,
right?
no, no,
Oh,
the
that's
chips,
the
the
chips,
chips,
the
it's all
chips.
good.
Um,
I think Greg had a
there's-
comment I wanted to ask.
Oh,
What's it?
I
You
just
wanna
wanted to
share
show
more?
this. This
Oh.
is cool. This is how the world's changed, right? Decisions were made by very few people. Every single person in every spectrum is a decision maker. We've shared this in the past, all the 100-year change stuff, all the work we do, even with Roger Martin on kind of like, everything is about building decision factories, right? And decision making, by the way, is a contact sport. You have to learn it in the field. You do not learn it in textbooks and sitting in classrooms and whatnot. There's just one more thing.
Actually, you reminded me, sorry, just before you do that, I was reminded, last week, Wei did a great job actually articulating what that slide with the Grand Canyon, the difference between in practice and theory.
Oh, yeah.
Wei was sitting at a coaching session last Friday in our office. I thought this was awesome, Wei. In
So
fact,
good.
I was telling my husband about this one because I'm excited for you in partnership with Greg, because the insight that Wei shared was, you can be sitting in a meeting, you can be listening to other people talking and putting themselves out there and doing, and feel like you're learning.
Mhm.
But when it comes to leadership and practice, and it comes to taking courage reps or creativity or whatever, like these are things you actually, it's like learning to throw a football. You can't learn to throw a football by reading about it in books. And the analogy Wei used was, it's like saying, I'm watching somebody else in the gym lift weights, but I'm getting stronger by watching someone else lift weights. You said this better, Wei, by the email, but like, you can't get stronger, you can't get better if you're not lifting. If you're not exercising, you can't watch other people exercising, right? Wei, you could probably
Yeah.
share what you said, but like, it was really
But
it was really
somewhere
good.
along the line of like, we're
Watching,
often
yeah.
watching people work out in the gym, and we do not get stronger watching.
I think this is what
Right.
happens with all the TED Talk movement, not just TED Talks, because they're all interesting. It is, but it's like you can get so into listening to other people talk and work and watching these, little reels on Instagram or wherever it might be, and you think you're learning. Because it's addicting, right? Because I do a podcast, I like to listen to the Stephen Kotlers like you do it, Laura, and I do. But it's like, if you don't actually figure out what from that to take and practice it, you think you're growing and learning, but it's, you know what I mean? You actually might feel more scared to try stuff because you're like, I have all this in my head, but the longer you don't go and putting it into practice, anyways, I think you can convince yourself you're getting stronger.
I'll just end this, like, I think this is just so cool. I've done this years back. Nick Saban was one of the winningest football coaches, talking about average players want to be left alone, good players want to be coached, great players want to be told the truth. Said another way, the average players are not thirsty. They don't really look to grow. Good players want to be coached. They want micromanagement. They want instruction. They're just constantly trying to bait out versus great players. They push the pace. They push the pace for everyone, right? They want to elevate the game, the mission. They're dying to elevate mission. So the most common mistake we've seen people make is that you take your best, your A, and you pair them with the C. Or you leave the A alone, right? And you focus on the Bs, right? As the next group that could elevate, or you focus all your time on the Cs, oftentimes a mistake. This is the right way is to pair the A's with A's because they can push each other to higher levels. The B's let you micromanage your own selves, and the C's with other C's, right? Once again, this is leadership in practice. So most people end up doing the stuff on top.
I like what you said, Deirdre. It reminds me of someone I knew years ago. She's saying who was a mess, but they had a library worth of self-help books at home, right?
Oh,
Like,
oh, yeah.
that's exactly.
And
Yes.
she's saying, and was constantly giving advice to
Oh,
others.
yeah,
yeah.
Oh yeah, no,
Right,
those people,
gross.
when I see it, I
Gross,
usually
gross,
get a
gross.
little throw up in my mouth. And I try to hold it back, but yes, people love doing that. Questions, any questions? I did not get a chance to see the chat. Usually Laura does not either, unless Laura this time she did. Assuming is no, but I don't know. Speak up if you
Well,
want.
so Greg has a comment, more of a reflection, and then same with Steve.
But- Yeah, but what's interesting? You can go to any slide if you guys want to unmute. Greg, you have a microphone in your hand, assuming it works this time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's related to what you're just saying, right? It dawned on me in kind of listening to this. If it's almost it's like a litmus test for myself of because sometimes I'm in a coaching situation, but it could be with a peer and way Mike, et cetera, of just getting advice. And when it's what intuitively comes to mind might be something I heard. It could be I read podcast. More often than not, it might be coaching you've given me, but yet I've not really internalized it, practiced it, put it to it, and I'm passing it along. Versus if it's like intuitively it's coming, like my almost intuitive reaction is something that, oh, like that resonates with something I'm doing, and be able to put it back as being like, I don't like those people either, but yet I am one. So that just kind of finger waggy. But to me, it just struck me that, wait a minute, that's a litmus test for me of, am I growing? Am I not? Because sometimes it can be very hard to tell if you're growing.
Yeah. My rule of thumb, Greg, on this is this. I like Deirdre, you had mentioned in one of our Co-Thursdays, I think it was the term aggressive hospitality. I think that was the term, right? The word aggressive.
I'm just gonna unmute, go ahead.
Audacious,
Gracious,
wasn't
okay.
it? Audacious.
Oh, no, I think it was aggressive.
Yeah, but they're all synonyms, like,
Yeah.
audacious, aggressive, right? Like just,
Yeah,
bold, right?
bold,
But,
yeah.
I think of coaching, giving advice in a very similar way to hospitality. There's a term they use in the tech space that you have to dog food your own stuff first, products. And if you are about hospitality, you do not serve dog food to your guests, right? So if I have a recipe, I want to try it first, try the version that tastes like dog food first before I serve it to my guests. Most people don't follow that protocol. They're
Yeah.
like, I have great advice. I read it. I want to give it to you, right? And I'm like, you're giving dog food, right? Most pieces of advice, right, is dog food unless you're learning in the trenches and you know how it turns out, right? It's like just handing out recipe cards, right? Just because I heard it's great,
Yeah.
right? Or like I saw someone make it, it's great. I'm like, why don't you try it yourself and see what happens? And then they try and they're like, oh my God, it tastes like dog food. And I watched Chef Mario do it. It like turned out perfect. Or when Chef Danny, Maria always complains, Danny's like pinching something and plopping it in. It's like some like cocaine fairy dust he's plopping in. We don't know, which is why it tastes so good. Like there's an element of like learning something in practice in the trenches. And only once I have experienced past the stage of dog foodness,
Yeah.
I want to give that to someone. That's a good mentor. That's a good coach.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are doing nothing but running a dog pound, serving dog food to everyone and thinking, why the hell aren't you thanking me for my amazing advice? And I'm like, because I don't want to tell you your advice is like dog food, right?
You're just saying it was radical hospitality.
Radical. Same words. These are all synonyms. Radical, aggressive, audacious, bold, but hospitality, right?
Like Monica, you have a question with your hand up.
Thank you. I want to go back to that slide, or well, it doesn't matter the slide. When you were talking about the co-founder relationship and why do they fail? And you were talking about like founder one and founder two, they both have to grow at the same rate. But I'm wondering what else is there. I am bringing my co-founder, which you know, to almost every event or training that I've been doing to train myself or personal and professional development. But I wonder if there's something else, or this is the number one reason why that situation fails.
So it's amazing there's a tiny nuance. I did not say same rate. That was the word you chose. I said different rates, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference. A lot of times, same rate, everyone feels they have to be exactly the same rate. You will never find two human beings at the exact same rate. There will always be moments where someone's ahead, someone's lower. And like, it's not a race. I hope you have competitive banter with a teammate to grow. But if your mission is to do better than your teammate, you're a bad teammate, right? Like there's a difference of pushing each other, that Nick Saban quote of like trying to get someone to raise standards and, push the pace for each other is vastly different than like same rate will get you to slow down so that we can feel equal, right?
Right.
I'm gonna prevent, so same rate and not same. But growing at different rates, by the way, is natural, but if it gets too fractured and doesn't change, you'll see is when the issue comes up. But here's one piece of advice I would say, and it's a common thing I've found. Watch what they're doing when you're not watching. Watch what they're doing in their automatic, right? A lot of people will grow when they're next to you. Watch what they do on the weekend, right? Watch what they do like in the morning before they come to work. Watch what they do in the evening when they leave. Those who want to grow, right? They are making it that important. Those who don't, right, are very good at looking like they're doing all the motions and all the right stuff when you're watching them. It's a common theme that's come out too. Like people say, oh, I'm a giver. Watch what they do when no one's watching, right? That's where the true signal comes in. So now there's a whole different thing. So I don't have a choice. I only have this other teammate. What do I do? And there's a whole part of just, it takes time, right? It takes time, and there is just a world of toolkits in front of you of sometimes you have to push them, sometimes you have to step back, sometimes you have to watch them fumble, sometimes and there's a whole thing that we created all in self-drive for that reason, right? You have to wait until it's self-driven, but you don't have a lot of time and patience, so you have to push. So this is where this is the tough part of practice, right? There is no black and white answer, right? But I do think awareness first. Just watch what they're doing when you're not watching. Other questions?
Yeah.
Comments?
No, related to that, it's good. And then I tend to be more pushy, so I don't want to over push and then break the relationship.
So my rule of thumb, and this is kind of different for everyone, I do not believe, so I always say, no, you're going to make an error. So I'd rather pick my errors than let them happen accidentally. I'd rather err on being more pushy than being more passive. Most people, by default, err on passive. And then they narrate all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, well, how are they going to read your mind? How would they know what you wanted if you didn't make it super clear? I'd rather err on being overly pushy, overly direct than err on the other side. Now, there's always exceptions to these rules, which is why you don't need to act like a programmed robot and do that all the time. And there's a cost of every mistake, right? But yeah, no, I prefer impatience to over patience, right? Both being bad, by the way, right?
I think the error is good. Isn't the NVIDIA CEO said something like, I'd rather
yeah.
I forget what he said.
I
I'd
think
rather traumatize people than
he makes,
torture them to get better.
yeah, if you're staying in my company,
yeah,
he
but
says, I basically torture them to get better,
Yeah.
right? Now, that's one of the
As I was like, that
highest
word
market
is-
cap companies, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
get to talk
You get to
about
talk
that,
about
but
that.
until they got there, I'm sure everyone thought he was a demon, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't really get there until the last 2 years. He came out of nowhere, right? But I can tell you, when you find someone who wants it more than you, my God. I mean, it literally is like suddenly the clouds parted, waterfalls going, full of babbling spring water. There's little snacks flying your way, right? Like calorie-free chips with guacamole coming your way, with yuca fries, I mean, everything great, right? It literally feels that amazing. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you how do you reapproach a mentor that you may have felt gave you shitty advice?
I gave you shitty advice.
Versus realizing that you have to do your own work in yourself to be a better mentee.
So there's a lot of these things you go in parallel. I always think it's an endless job to be a better mentee. It's never done, right? Just like it's an endless job to be a great mentor. So just kind of recognize that. So when you say reapproach a mentor who gave you shitty advice, my first thought was, do you want them in your life? Because once you invite them back, they will pummel you with potentially a lot more shitty advice, right? So there's a part of like, sometimes you may not want that, for one, but say you want to build it back. I find, well, there's many ways to build relationships back, but one of the hardest things that people lack the courage to do is be honest,
Yeah.
right? And so being honest over email and text could be a little crappy, but sometimes you have no choice. I would err on volume of details if you're going to be honest. The worst is to say, you gave me to the email or text, you gave me bad advice and it really hurt me.
Yeah.
I just want you to know. I'm like,
Yeah.
why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You just feel better getting the shot off your chest, right? So you're gonna have to explain the details, right? And it might be a lengthy email they may never look at. You might have to write it and then look to summarize it at the very top of, here's my bottom line up front kind of part of it. Or you can do it in person too, but be careful also catching them off guard. Sometimes like they're thinking we're having a social drink and you're like, can I just let you get it off my chest? That's like a very selfish thing to get off your chest. People do that all the time and think that I'm doing good by getting it off my chest. You're usually being an asshole because they offered you free help and it's upon you to figure out what to do with it, but you blame them for it still, right? That's your baggage, your issue. So my first thing is, do you really want them back in your life? And sometimes like you have to work with difficult people, assholes even at times. We're not always in a place where we can only be that picky. And so.
You know what I was gonna say, Mario, it's interesting,
What are we gonna say?
anyway,
Sorry.
so Charlie's been my biggest mentor, and so it's interesting, I've spent a lot of time in the last year and a half with this whole case and everything that we're going through. Look back at certain advice and think, so what I wrote down was accuracy. I have a lot of mental models and I'm like, I think that's what he told me to do, and I'm thinking, I think that was bad advice, but I actually am not sure I took the advice the right way, because the way I translated it is different than maybe what the mentor meant, because it's depending on what's happening in my life situationally. And when you're in a deprivation or whatever, when you're in a maybe desperate taking advice situation you're in, you hear what you want to hear. Like, you know what I mean? You hear that, so I don't know what the situation is, but like, you know, you'll hear something and think, you know, that's what he's saying. That's what he told me to do. And then I did that and it didn't work out. So now I'm thinking, you suck, right? Mentor sucks. That was bad advice. I took it. I'm hurt now. As opposed to, wait a minute, did I, you know, looking back, and actually, if you really want to understand, like what was happening when you took that advice, how did you ask for the advice? What did they say? How did you translate it? Like, I just think it's so easy to think the advice was bad without realizing like how you translate it. I know it sounds like, well, the advice is the advice. Not really, because like I'm realizing in the nuances, I forget situationally, it's tied to something I said. So I might say, I'm making this up right now, but like, say I tell Charlie, I'm working at my son Brendan is struggling with this, whatever I'm sharing, he's reacting to. So if I don't share more in detail and what the whole thing is, I'm putting the mentor in a position to give me advice without knowing everything. But because I might feel desperate on something, I'm like, you know what, I heard that, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna try that. And then it blows up in my face and I'm like, screw you. Like, that was shitty advice. But I guess I'm saying like,
I'm
it's
putting
like,
this example of it.
Yeah.
What Monica heard, I mean, same class, it's recorded, you can play it back. Like,
you didn't say.
I did not say same rates, but that's what you heard. We all have our
That happened in the academy
biases.
last week too, at
Yeah,
Devon, right?
yeah.
You said something. and
No,
she
we all have our
translated it.
biases and
Yeah.
there's a part where we don't recognize,
Yeah.
we hear what we want to
hear
hear.
what we wanna
And
hear.
They
This-
say in research, most of us hear 15% of what was said.
Is that
And
what
that's
it
like
is?
good listeners, right? 15%. So I mean, just imagine
Yeah.
the inaccuracy, the distortion, right?
Yeah, no, I feel like the mentor is reacting to what you put out. So if you put out distortion, you're gonna get feedback and advice that's distorted, and then you're gonna take it, use it, and then think the mentor or the advisor give you bad. It's like,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know?
And it sounds like
Sorry,
what
could
you're
I ask a quick question on what Megan just said?
Steve, ask away,
Just to-
ask away.
Yeah, so it was just making me think about something today. You might have seen it in the WhatsApp group we have. Caroline asked about the emotional and brain component. She asked me
Yes.
that first, and I was
Oh.
like, I'm not really sure. This is my take on it, but you
Okay.
should ask in the WhatsApp group and get, more feedback on it. So that made
Steve,
me think about what
can
you were.
by the way, put your take in the WhatsApp group. I'd love to see it if you don't mind too, but okay. But go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll put it in there.
Tell us your take. on it.
Tell it right now.
No, we're not. No, I'm curious.
Yeah. So I said, I believe trying to like paraphrase right now, the emotional side is like controls more of your action. So she asked about the top performers being the 85%. I said the emotional controls more of how we take action in the narrative, like our story that we have in our head, than we actually think. We think it's more on our like brain logic, physical side that makes us a top performer. And then I'll just pull it up because I'm gonna say it wrong.
What would you put in here?
I said physical only makes up 15% of being a high performer. The other 85% is emotional awareness. Our heart emotion tells us the story we believe. And if we don't have awareness of where our emotions are, we can make bad decisions. We think we can look at everything logically, brain, but we take action or don't take action off of our emotions more than we think. Example, fears and frustration. A way to work on it is expose them, like with On My Minds, or being authentic and sharing what you are really thinking more with trusted people. And I said that's the hard work.
So here, Steve, I'm actually doing this live right now. So my visceral answer to your question, Caroline, sorry, Mom Beth. First, rule of thumb, how to be less stupid. In other words, stupid is so what I just sent in the chat is this slide. Where is it? Oh, here. Yeah, so I just sent an image of this slide. Decisions follow our emotion, so you have to understand how it goes wrong. And there's two main buckets that drive the worst decisions. When you're angry, desperate, frustrated, you're likely to make a reckless decision that you will regret. When you're sad, scared, and ashamed, you're likely to make a paralysis. So as in a decision you should have made, you don't do anything, you freeze. So even just recognizing those left emotions and the very wrong thing, the goal is try not to be stupid by doing the things in the right when you feel the left.
You know what it is, Charlie?
Sorry,
This is
what's that?
fear. Sad, scared, ashamed is the fear. The angry, desperate, frustrated is the frustration.
okay.
Fear and frustration. Because the way I answered Caroline was,
Ooh, even better.
I was just about to say, like, what are you talking about? Because the 1, 2 is the courage to be authentic, to go into difficult. That's what I said to Caroline in the WhatsApp. Courage to be authentic, go into difficult situations, conflict, danger versus avoid it. And then the creativity, this is where the intelligence comes in, the key to combat anxiety, which is like make something that didn't exist. But that's part 2. I think what you're saying, that's part 2. Part 1 is you first have to prevent the stupid. And where the stupid comes in is where you have FF. So high fear and high frustration. That's what you're, okay. So I answered part 2 of the training, but part 1 is the FF, obviously, and then the VX.
It's crazy. I know the word stupid is not very liked these days, but or maybe it's back now, but
This is the phase 1.
Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, it's been their number one, the top investors in the world historically for the longest time. It's amazing how much money you can make just by not being stupid. Like literally dialing down your stupid decisions. Like you could do really well just by doing that.
Yeah.
And so first to dial it down, you have to recognize these two main buckets of lethal emotions. And there's probably synonyms often that end up resulting in the stupid decision. And it's always the decision that you pay the price on. You don't pay the price for the emotion. You don't pay the sense-making ooting on the emotion. It's when you do the thing on the right. And see, one is reckless actions. The other one is basically doing nothing. So they're like kind of difficult, right? One is you overacted, the other one's you didn't act, right? So that's like oh my God, what do I do? Because the advice is kind of the exact opposite of each other, right? You know what I mean?
Stories,
overacted.
stories and routine. The stories is the FF, BX, and the routine is the courage and creativity. It is coming together live. It's what they call learning in public, guys. That's what Charlie said.
Yeah, I mean, they're like,
Ooh, it's like an
This is
acronym.
what's
Learning in public is lip too. Learning in public, learning in practice. I love stuff like that.
but yeah, no, I cannot tell you, just recognizing this will make you stop. And what people don't realize is, you know how you get awareness? You have to say it, expose it, right? Be hot, humble, open, transparent. Most people are like, I recognize it in hiding in my head, say it to myself, and I'm like on the other side of you saying, no, you gotta do something, you gotta do something. I was like, oh God, right? This is the part you don't understand, the mad 3,000 words per minute chatter that's going in your head. And you wonder why you keep making the same mistake. Like, be hot, humble, open, transparent. Open means another human being has to hear it, right? Not like, well, I said it to myself, right?
Yeah.
And so just the avoidance of this, right? As in, when I say avoidance, as in doing less of this, you'll be shocked how much more
Yeah.
successful it would be just doing less of this.
Stupid. Oh my God, it's so funny, because isn't that what,
And of course,
Elon is
Carolyn
talking
being,
about that being less stupid, isn't that kind of like
Yeah, I
what
mean,
he's been talking
like,
about, like, we just.
Carolyn's a
stuff
kid,
is stupid.
stuff, so like, kids, the beauty for her, you should tell her, is that, when you're 17 years old, you have like a get out of jail free card and the stuff even adults can't do well, right? So like, all you have to just pull up the sign and be like, ooh, it's another instance where I didn't get a hold of my emotions, so I didn't make the right decision. They'll be like, wow, you even just saying that makes me
Yeah,
say, I
that's
want to
huge.
hire you for an internship.
Imagine, yeah, a
Right?
kid saying, whoa, I'm
Right?
feeling
Yeah.
some fear, some frustration, I shouldn't engage in this.
But at 17, you have a get out of jail free card. You like literally get out of jail free card probably till like 30. Someone turned 30 this year for us. No more get out of jail free card, right? But yeah, like just tell Carolyn, boldness, right? Like make your mistakes proudly, because you're like, I'm 17, I'm learning, right? I did it again. I was sad, scared, and ashamed, so I did nothing, right? My God, right? Or like, oh my God, I was so angry at my twin brother, and I just kind of just like did this, and be like, oh my God, I did that again. Oh my God, should be like praised, celebrated. They'll be like,
You're right, because if you look back at the things that you're not proud of, we call them not napalms, right? The not a proud moment, they all come from acting when you have high frustration or fear. It's like when you just have napalm after napalm after napalm,
It's
which I,
crazy. 17 times 3 is 51. I have been on planet Earth 3 times longer than Carol. And I still make a lot of mistakes and then be hot about it. So
humble,
tell
open,
her, like,
transparent.
literally,
Get used to that.
I've never met someone making more mistakes than be hot about it than Charlie. So at 17, do not learn the muscle to be whatever's
It's
the
so
opposite of
funny, be
hotness.
hot about it.
What would be the opposite of hotness?
Hotness would be, so what's the opposite of humble is entitled, so it's an E. And then, what's the opposite of open would be closed minded, right? And then, what's the opposite of hot, open, transparent would be, liar, hidden.
That's a weird one.
So ECH, eck. Don't be eck. It's kind of sounds like ick. It sounds like ick.
Egg or ecky or icky.
Oh,
Yeah,
ecky,
ecky,
ecky.
ecky. What would be the Y?
Just, why not? Just
Entitled, closed, and, what was the H again? Hidden,
titled,
closed minded, titled, closed minded, and hidden agendas.
entitled, closed-minded, hidden, you, ecky, or icky.
You.
We'll come up with something. Can someone use ChatGPT and find
Massage
something? But yes, tell Carolyn to not be icky, right? Tell her mom, you're being so icky, right? We need to be hotter. All right.
It was good to see you in person, Monica, not in your car.
Oh, yes.
And,
yeah.
yeah, and those, and Brian, we
Same.
missed you. Yeah, Brian, we missed your face
Oh,
being here.
yes,
And it
yes.
looks like Olivia was on the call with us. I just saw that she's
There was
still
a lot
on.
of people that were.
Yeah, Mauricio, good to have you. Lisa, Lucina, Josephine, Dennis, DeGong is with us. I didn't realize
Yeah,
Carlos,
no.
all these people.
Yeah, we have.
All right. I don't know what we're doing next week, but it's 1:00. We should go.
Oh, yes, we got our lunch.
I don't know what engagement.
Oh, I don't know, but I mean, there's a lot of slides we didn't get to, so we can do more next week. We have a
To
lot.
be continued,
Yeah, we have a lot to cover.
TBC.
And then I just realized we have like files and files of 10-year-old presentations that most of it still works, minus a few updates. So anyways, too much material is my plague.
All right,
Okay.
guys, see you next week.